Hello. We're going over the This Changes Everything paper for Psychology of Women. It's a 6-page paper which doesn't include the title page and reference page. If you need help on how to do a title page or reference page, there are some links in the assignment. So you'll have 6 pages that you actually write. And you can think about the paper in 2 sections. The first section is writing about certain topics that you observe in This Changes Everything, the documentary by Gina Davis. The second part of the paper, which is about 3 pages and 3 pages, part 1 and part 2, the second part of the paper is you choose your video that you want to watch, whatever movie, and apply what you learned from watching This Changes Everything to the video that you watch. And there are some topics you can cover which are listed in the assignment. So when you look in the assignment, it's broken down into part 1 and part 2. And in part 1, you'll be actually watching the documentary, This Changes Everything, and that's in Canopy. I don't want you to refer to like websites that summarize it. I actually want you to watch the film, right? So make sure you have enough time to do this because you're watching 2 films and you're writing a paper. So the first part, after you watch This Changes Everything, do you agree with this point of view that you're watching in the movie? Explain why or why not you do. The next part is explain how you feel this film would be received by Americans 25 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So I want you to cover all those time periods and I want you to mention what women's movements or historical marches, passages of laws happened during those times in the 1990s, in the 70s or 1960s, or 100 years ago in the 1920s. And there are actually things that happened in the women's movements during that time. And I want you to show what you know and how this film would be received then, in your opinion. So mention all 3 time periods. Then, what psychological theories or terminology from our textbook and PowerPoints apply to issues discussed in the documentary? So this is a great opportunity to cite the source of your textbook, Atah, 2018. You just cite the source. You can do a quotation with quotation marks, or you can paraphrase what you read in the book in your own words and then put in parentheses afterwards the citation. And then you list your citations on the last page, which is your reference page. And we use APA format in psychology papers. And you can ask further questions with the Writing Center. They have actual workshop on APA, or you can do the private tutoring or just give them a call. And you can also ask me. I'm happy to answer your questions. There are also links within the assignment that you can go and do your own research and learn. And I do expect this to be a learning experience for some people that have never written in APA format. APA format is basically 1-inch margins, double-spaced paper, and using a title page and reference page, and then citing your sources. You don't have to do any of the extensive APA stuff like an appendix and all that. I just want you to do the exercise of double-spacing your paper, 1-inch margins, title page, reference page, and then citing your sources. So you're going to mention a couple of, like maybe 3 things from the textbook, 3 terms. You can say what the term is, you can define the term, and then you can say how it applies. And that's a really good way to fill out your paper and also show what you know, because that's the point. Explain how the themes in the documentary relate to current day issues for American women and their families. So I don't have a specific idea of what you would say. This is kind of you applying what you learned to how that would apply now to women today. Okay, there's a link then. I'm just going through the directions here. Be sure to include a title page. There's a link to show you what a title page is and to cite your sources. Then part 2. So that's your first 3 pages, right? Pretty easy. Watch a movie. You cover those things. You don't have to go into it extensively, but put those into 3 pages if you can. The next part is watch your own film. So maybe you watch, whatever your favorite film is, and then apply what you learned to these 3 pages. And I left you some examples of what you could look for, and showing what you learned from watching this changes everything. So give an overview of the film you watched and the title, just so I can be on board with the film you're talking about, and who are the main characters in the films, just so I can understand what the film was about. I'll probably be familiar. So things you can mention is how many women are in the film, how many women have large roles, do they have a dialogue over 20 lines, what roles are women in, are they maids, mothers, bankers, smaller roles? What are the approximate ages of the women in the film? Are there many women with leading parts over 50 years old? Are there women of color in the film? How many women of color are the film? How many lines do the women of color have in the film? What are the roles being played by the women of color? Very interesting. What are the appropriate ages of women of color in the film? And what are your personal reflections, recommendations, insight, advice, or wisdom about viewing your film and the information you received by this changes everything and how it applies? Generally, what's your takeaway? So you can mention some of these things. I'm not going through a checklist here, but that's what you can cover in the 3 pages. Also, although it's numbered in the directions, I want you to write this in essay format. Also, when you're doing an essay, which this 6-page paper is, it's always nice to do an introductory paragraph. I'm going to be covering blah, 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 writing about this. And then the end is, and in summary, I learned this. It's just kind of a general nice overview. And many of you will have even better ideas of how to approach this than that. But simply, that would be a good approach. So I think that covers it. I hope this is helpful. Oh, remember that Canvas doesn't accept Google Docs. So you want to, and it won't go through Turnitin automatically. And you don't have to worry about putting it through Turnitin. I've set it up so your paper automatically goes through Turnitin. So if you do it in Google, make sure that you submit a PDF. And also, Canvas won't process text documents or page documents. Think about Turnitin, and Turnitin is this computer source, if you're not familiar with it, and it has all of the papers basically ever written by students or that are out there that have run through its computers. And it will flag things like if you use Course Hero or other things as a way to shortcut, let's say, your paper. So it's not acceptable. And you want to make sure that the words you use are your own. And if they're not, they're in quotations and you cite your source. And if you paraphrase, which is totally acceptable. If you paraphrase information from a paper and don't use quotations, just say where you got that information from. The idea is giving credit where credit is due, that it didn't come from you sitting on your balcony and you had this idea, right? It's not your idea. You read it in a book. So then say what book you read it in, right? Or say what movie you read it in. So at least in your reference page, you'll list the film that you watched, the 2 films that you watched, right? And you will also show where you use that information inside your paper. Sometimes people are intimidated by this, but I look at this APA format writing exercise as a learning process. So there will be some grace, and I am open to answering your questions. So typically this is due on a Thursday, and you can count on me to be available to around 5 o'clock. on Thursday, please ask me well in advance, and you can also ask me if your paper uploaded properly. And there you go. I hope you find this helpful.